The Galactic Council chamber was a marvel of alien architecture, a vast, gleaming arena suspended in the void of space, its transparent walls offering an unbroken view of a distant nebula glowing in hues of violet and gold. Inside, the chamber was alive with motion and sound, a cacophony of alien languages blending into a symphony of unease. Delegates from countless species filled the tiers, their forms as varied as their voices. Luminescent beings floated like liquid light alongside creatures encased in chitinous armor, while serpentine figures coiled around ornate perches, their scales reflecting the chamber's ambient glow. The air was thick with tension, and the ever-watchful presence of armed guards reminded all of the Empire's iron grip. At the center of the room sat the representatives of the Galactic Empire, a coalition of powerful species that had long since claimed dominion over the galaxy. They were a striking contrast to the rest of the chamber, arrogant in their bearing, clad in regalia that shimmered like molten gold. The Empire's delegates spoke little but exuded an aura of supremacy that needed no words. Their disdain for the so-called lesser species was palpable, a disdain rooted in centuries of unchallenged authority. In a corner of the chamber, the human envoy stood quietly, an anomaly in this display of alien grandeur. Humanity's entry into the interstellar stage was recent, a mere flicker in the timeline of the galaxy. Yet that flicker had drawn attention, too much attention. The humans were unlike the others, adapting with a speed that unsettled even the most seasoned empires. They had taken to interstellar travel and politics with a cunning that belied their relative infancy, turning weaknesses into strengths in ways no one had anticipated. The human diplomat was an enigma. Clad in a simple but impeccably tailored suit, he was the embodiment of restraint amid the chaos. His face bore no trace of fear, only an unshakable calm that unsettled those who dared to meet his gaze. The faintest smirk played at the corner of his lips, as if he knew a secret no one else did. He had spoken sparingly since his arrival, answering questions with an economy of words that revealed little but hinted at much. The Empire had taken notice. Whispers rippled through the chamber, rumors of human spies, of plans hatched in shadows, of rebellion brewing in the uncharted reaches of space. The humans, it seemed, were not content to remain in their assigned place on the galactic ladder. And so, the Empire had decided to act, summoning the human envoy under the pretext of addressing allegations of espionage. The summons was more than a mere formality. It was a calculated move, a test of humanity's loyalty, or perhaps a trap. As the Empire's High Chancellor, a towering figure with eyes like burning coals, called the chamber to order, the murmurs faded into an expectant silence. All eyes turned to the human envoy, the room heavy with anticipation. The Chancellor's voice, cold and commanding, cut through the quiet like a blade. Humanity stands accused of treachery against the Empire. Your kind's rapid rise has raised questions that demand answers. The diplomat stepped forward, his movements measured, his expression inscrutable. He paused, allowing the weight of the moment to settle over the chamber. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm and deliberate, carrying just enough weight to command attention without betraying emotion. Humanity seeks only to contribute to the prosperity of the galaxy, he said, his words carefully chosen. If our progress has caused unease, it is because we believe in the value of growth and adaptation. Surely the great Galactic Empire understands the importance of evolution. The response, though measured, struck a nerve. The Empire's arrogance had left them unaccustomed to such subtle defiance. A murmur of discontent rippled through the delegates. The Chancellor's eyes narrowed, and his lips curled into a faint sneer. Evolution, he repeated, his tone dripping with contempt. Or cunning deceit? Your words are as smooth as your kind's rise has been sudden. The Empire does not tolerate shadows in its light. Tension coiled in the air like a living thing. The human envoy met the Chancellor's gaze without flinching, his faint smile unchanged. Then perhaps it is the shadows you should fear, he said softly, the words carrying an edge that sent a ripple of unease through the room. The silence that followed was electric. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire chamber held its breath. Then, with a sharp gesture, the Chancellor summoned a contingent of guards. They moved swiftly, surrounding the human envoy with weapons drawn. The message was clear: this was no mere inquiry. The Empire intended to make an example of humanity. The diplomat remained still, his expression unchanged, as if the guards were beneath his notice. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, his smile widened. There was no fear in his eyes, only a glint of something colder, sharper. He tilted his head slightly, as though considering the situation, and spoke once more, his voice low but carrying with unsettling clarity. "You've made a grave mistake." The words hung in the air, heavy with foreboding, as the guards closed in. The human diplomat strode into the council chamber with an air of unsettling composure. His steps were unhurried, yet deliberate, as if every movement served a purpose. The faint hum of murmurs grew louder as the alien delegates watched him take his place at the center of the room. His attire was simple, devoid of the flamboyance or opulence common among the galactic elite, but somehow it drew more attention than the most ornate regalia. He seemed to absorb the room's attention effortlessly, the sharp contrast between his humanity and the alien grandeur making him stand out like a blade gleaming in the dark. The delegates' reactions varied, though none were welcoming. A serpentine representative hissed softly, its scales shifting hues in agitation. A hulking insectoid creature clicked its mandibles, a sound of thinly veiled contempt. Even the luminous beings, their fluid forms normally serene, pulsed faintly in hues of unease. Their skepticism and hostility were clear. This human, a representative of an upstart species, had no place among them, much less the confidence to appear so unfazed. The diplomat, however, seemed untouched by the tension. His expression remained composed, his dark eyes scanning the room with a piercing intensity that left those under his gaze feeling as though their secrets had been laid bare. There was something in his demeanor, a subtle darkness, like the shadow of a storm on the horizon. It wasn't overt, but it lingered, an unspoken warning that even those unfamiliar with humans could sense. The High Chancellor's voice broke the silence. "Human," he said, his tone a mixture of disdain and authority. "You stand before the Galactic Council accused of espionage and treachery. Do you deny the charges?" The diplomat inclined his head slightly, his movements precise, almost predatory. "I deny nothing," he said, his voice calm yet unnervingly direct. "But neither do I admit to baseless accusations. If the great empire has evidence, I trust it will present it now." His words, spoken with a quiet confidence, sent ripples through the room. The Chancellor's expression tightened, and a delegate to his left, a creature with multiple glittering eyes, leaned forward. "Your kind is cunning," it said, its voice a high-pitched chime. "You speak as if you are innocent, yet your actions betray your ambition. Humanity does not rise without stepping on others." The diplomat turned toward the speaker, his faint smile never faltering. "And your kind," he replied, "has risen by stepping on everything. Is that not how empires are built? Or is humanity's ambition so unfamiliar that it feels like treachery to you?" His tone remained even, almost conversational, yet the barb struck deep. A murmur of disapproval swept through the chamber, but he seemed undeterred. His gaze shifted from one delegate to another, never lingering too long, yet leaving each with a sense of having been scrutinized. He spoke again, his voice soft but carrying. "Perhaps the discomfort lies not in our ambition, but in the fact that we achieve without your permission." The tension thickened, and the High Chancellor's voice grew colder. "You play with words as though they shield you," he said. "But your species is naive if it believes cleverness can mask its weakness. The Empire does not tolerate deception." The human smile widened, though it remained far from warm. "Weakness is often a matter of perspective," he said. "And as for deception, I assure you, the truth can be far more unsettling." The chamber fell silent again, the alien delegates shifting uncomfortably. The High Chancellor gestured subtly, and the guards stationed along the room's perimeter began to move, inching closer to the diplomat with practiced precision. Their weapons, sleek and deadly, glinted under the chamber's lights. The diplomat appeared to take no notice, his posture relaxed, his attention seemingly fixed on the Chancellor. The verbal sparring continued, the accusations growing more pointed, the responses more measured. Each word from the human seemed to tighten the tension in the room, like a wire stretched to its limit. Yet the diplomat's calm never wavered. If anything, the faint trace of amusement in his eyes grew more pronounced. The guards had nearly completed their encirclement, their movements subtle enough to avoid drawing overt attention. To most of the chamber, it seemed as though they were merely standing ready, a precaution rather than a threat. But to the diplomat, their intent was as clear as the nebula visible beyond the chamber's walls. As the High Chancellor delivered what he clearly believed to be a final, damning accusation, the diplomat tilted his head slightly, as if considering his next words carefully. Then, he looked directly at the Chancellor, his voice dropping to a tone that sent a chill through the room. "You've made a grave mistake." The words, spoken with quiet finality, hung in the air like the calm before a storm. For a heartbeat, the chamber was still. Then the guards moved as one, their weapons raised, and the trap was sprung. The moment the guards surged forward, the air shifted. The diplomat moved faster than any of them could react, his precise, fluid motions a stark contrast to their brutish attempts to subdue him. A blur of calculated efficiency, he sidestepped the first blow with unsettling ease, his hand darting out to seize the attacker's weapon. Before the alien could react, the sharp end of the confiscated blade was buried in its chest, the sound of fracturing exoskeleton reverberating through the chamber. Chaos erupted. The other guards hesitated for the briefest of moments, thrown off by the speed and precision of their target, but that hesitation cost them dearly. The diplomat spun, his movements like a dance of death, his strikes deliberate and devastating. Another guard lunged, only to find its arm twisted at an unnatural angle, the weapon it had wielded now in the human's grasp. The shot it had intended for the diplomat found its mark in one of its own instead, sending the alien crumpling to the floor. In the cacophony of screams and shouts, the diplomat's voice cut through like a blade. "You thought I was weak," he said, his tone cold and steady, his words aimed at the room as much as his adversaries'. "You thought humanity could be cowed by threats and brute force. You never asked yourselves why they sent me." As the guards regrouped, their movements now marked by uncertainty, the diplomat straightened, the smirk on his face gone, replaced by something far more menacing. The faint glint in his eyes took on a predatory edge, and in that moment, he began to speak, not to the guards, but to himself, as though unveiling a secret long kept hidden. "Jack," he murmured, almost reverently. "They called me Jack." His voice lowered, his words now carrying a chilling weight. "The darkest corners of humanity bore my name. They feared me then, and it seems fear still serves its purpose." He moved again, faster than before, his actions laced with an efficiency that spoke of training far beyond what was natural. Alien after alien fell under his assault, their superior strength and numbers meaningless against his lethality. Blood, thick and multicolored, streaked across the pristine floor, pooling around the fallen. His movements seemed almost surgical, each strike an execution, each motion a reminder of humanity's ability to adapt and overcome. The alien delegates watched in growing horror as the guards, their supposed best, faltered. One of them, trembling and unable to look away, whispered to a companion, "What is he?" The diplomat seemed to hear. He turned his head slightly, his gaze locking onto the one who had spoken. His smile returned, sharp and devoid of warmth. "Something you should have left undisturbed," he said, his voice dripping with quiet menace. His reputation had been a legend even among his own kind, a monster of the shadows, his name synonymous with terror. The diplomat was no ordinary man but a weapon forged in the crucible of human desperation. The experiments that had resurrected him were whispered about in Earth's darkest circles, a blend of biotechnological brilliance and ethical compromise. They had brought him back, not as the man he once was, but as something sharper, darker, and utterly controlled. The perfect instrument of psychological warfare, and the perfect emissary for a species determined to survive at any cost. The guards faltered, their ranks thinning with every passing second, and panic began to spread like wildfire. The diplomat capitalized on it, his movements now deliberately theatrical, each takedown a display of dominance designed to unnerve. He spoke as he fought, His words aimed not at his attackers but at the audience watching in stunned silence. "You underestimated us," he said, his voice carrying over the din. "You thought humans were fragile, that we lacked the will to fight. But you forget, our history is written in blood, our evolution forged in struggle. We thrive in chaos." One of the guards, visibly trembling, raised its weapon, only to have it knocked from its grasp in a single, effortless motion. The diplomat leaned close, his voice a whisper meant only for his target but audible to the entire room. "Run," he said, his tone devoid of emotion. The alien froze, its resolve shattering as it bolted for the exit, its courage abandoned. The panic was complete now. The remaining guards, no longer a unified force, began to retreat, their discipline crumbling. The delegates, once so confident in their empire's superiority, were paralyzed by the sight of their best reduced to prey. The High Chancellor himself, previously a figure of unshakable authority, sat rigid, his expression betraying a mixture of disbelief and fear. The diplomat turned, his gaze locking onto the general who had orchestrated the ambush. The alien's composure was cracking, its mandibles clicking in an unconscious display of anxiety. The human took a slow step forward, his blood-streaked hands relaxed at his sides, his movements calm despite the carnage surrounding him. The general's guards instinctively stepped in front of their leader, but the diplomat's smirk returned, a cold promise of what was to come. His voice, low and deliberate, echoed through the chamber, silencing the remaining whispers of panic. "Now," he said, his tone sharp as a blade. "It's your turn." The alien general's mandibles clicked in frustration as he barked a command into his communicator. Reinforcements surged into the station, a flood of heavily armed guards streaming through the corridors. The general's confidence returned momentarily, bolstered by the overwhelming numbers now at his disposal. Yet, for all their preparation, they were unready for the chaos the human would unleash. The diplomat retreated deeper into the station, moving with a predator's instinct and precision. He manipulated the environment with unsettling ease, each motion calculated to draw his opponents into traps of their own making. A cluster of guards pursued him into a dimly lit passage, only to trigger a series of concealed gas valves he had reprogrammed moments before. A toxic hiss filled the air, and they fell, choking, while the diplomat moved on, untouched. Another group encountered him near a maintenance hatch. Before they could react, the corridor's lighting system failed, plunging them into darkness. The next sounds were screams, punctuated by sharp, metallic impacts. When the lights flickered back on, the human was gone, leaving only silence and the lifeless forms of those who had thought to corner him. As the battle unfolded, fragments of memory surfaced in the diplomat's mind, interwoven with the chaos around him. He remembered the first time they woke him, how the sterile light of the laboratory had felt colder than any grave, the sterile voices of the scientists a poor substitute for the whispers of the London fog. Humanity had resurrected him not out of reverence but desperation. The galaxy was an unforgiving place, filled with species older, stronger, and more ruthless. Diplomacy alone had failed to secure humanity's place. Their survival demanded something different, someone capable of instilling fear in those who saw Earth as a target. Jack the Ripper, a specter of humanity's darkest impulses, had been reborn as the embodiment of their refusal to be dominated. The memories burned bright as he fought. Each trap he set, each calculated strike, each defeated foe, it all reinforced the purpose behind his resurrection. Humanity's ingenuity, their ability to turn even their darkest chapters into tools of survival, was what made them dangerous in ways the Empire could never understand. The alien reinforcements, despite their numbers, faltered. They were trained for brute force conflicts, their strategies built on overwhelming strength. Against an opponent like the diplomat, their weaknesses became glaring. Their rigid formations and reliance on predictable tactics played directly into his hands. He hacked into the station's systems, rerouting doors to trap squads and dead-end corridors. He overloaded power grids, turning harmless infrastructure into deadly hazards. Each act of sabotage underscored the Empire's inability to adapt to an enemy who thrived on creativity and unpredictability. The council chamber watched in stunned silence, the High Chancellor's confident facade cracking with every report of losses. Alien delegates whispered among themselves, the tension palpable. For centuries, they had dismissed humanity as an upstart species, too young and fragile to pose a threat. Now they saw the truth. Humanity's strength lay not in brute force but in their ability to turn disadvantage into opportunity, to transform desperation into innovation. The diplomat's actions were more than mere survival. They were a declaration, a statement that humanity would not bow, no matter the odds. As he dismantled the Empire's forces, he became a living symbol of their resilience. Every calculated strike and every improvised weapon was a testament to humanity's refusal to be cowed. Finally, the tide of reinforcements slowed, the once steady stream of guards reduced to scattered pockets of resistance. The station, once a symbol of the Empire's might, now bore the scars of the Diplomat's campaign, a shattered infrastructure, corridors strewn with the fallen, and systems in disarray. The Diplomat emerged from the shadows, his movements calm despite the carnage surrounding him. His suit, once pristine, was now streaked with blood and grime, yet he carried himself with the same unnerving composure he had displayed when he first entered the chamber. The trail of devastation he left in his wake spoke volumes, a silent message to the Empire and its delegates. Humanity's ingenuity and resolve were forces that no amount of arrogance could defeat. As he approached the council chamber, the remaining guards hesitated, their weapons trembling in their hands. They had seen what he was capable of and knew their fates would mirror those of their comrades if they tried to stop him. One by one, they stepped aside, allowing him to pass. The chamber doors loomed ahead, their imposing structure now a mere obstacle in his path. Behind them, the council waited, those who had plotted his ambush, who had underestimated the depths of humanity's determination. Without hesitation, he pushed the doors open and stepped inside. The chamber fell silent as the diplomat stepped through the massive doors, his silhouette framed by the carnage left in his wake. The alien delegates, once confident in their supremacy, now cowered in their seats, their pride eroded by the weight of their collective fear. Even the High Chancellor, a figure of supposed unshakable authority, seemed diminished, his once commanding presence reduced to a husk of anxiety. The diplomat's movements were measured as he walked toward the council's center, his footsteps echoing ominously in the cavernous room. He paused, surveying the gathered representatives. His gaze lingered on each of them, the cold, calculating stare cutting deeper than any weapon could. "You believed humanity was beneath you," he began, his voice steady and unyielding, each word a hammer striking at the foundation of their arrogance. "You saw our inexperience in the stars as weakness, our diplomacy as submission. But today, you've learned otherwise." The Chancellor tried to muster a response, but his voice faltered. Another delegate, bolder in desperation, spoke instead, their tone wavering. This is an act of war." The diplomat tilted his head slightly, a flicker of amusement crossing his face. "War?" he echoed. "No. This was survival, a demonstration of what happens when you push humanity too far." He stepped closer to the table, his tone darkening. "War would look much worse." The delegates shifted uncomfortably, their postures betraying their growing unease. The silence that followed was oppressive, broken only by the diplomat's measured voice as he continued. "You call yourselves the Galactic Empire, rulers of countless worlds, masters of the stars. But you are blind to your own fragility. Your strength lies in numbers and brute force, yet you lack the one thing that makes humanity dangerous: the will to adapt, to endure, to overcome." He leaned forward slightly, his piercing gaze locking onto the Chancellor. "We've faced extinction more times than I can count, wars, plagues, disasters of our own making. Each time, we emerged stronger, smarter, more resilient. You," his voice took on a sharper edge, "you've grown complacent, soft in your arrogance. That's why you will lose." The words hung in the air, each one a dagger to the delegate's pride. Some looked away, unable to meet his eyes. Others sat frozen, trapped between anger and fear. But not all of them. A delegate from a smaller faction, their species known for pragmatism rather than power, leaned forward. Their voice, though quiet, carried a note of cautious respect. You've proven humanity's strength, they said. Perhaps there is more to gain as allies than adversaries. The diplomat's expression remained unreadable, but the faintest glimmer of acknowledgement flickered in his eyes. A wise perspective, he replied. One I hope others will adopt before they meet the same fate as those who underestimated us today. The room shifted subtly, a murmur of agreement rippling through the ranks of the lesser powers. The seeds of an unlikely alliance were sown in that moment, though the larger factions bristled at the suggestion. The diplomat straightened, his presence filling the chamber as he delivered his final ultimatum. This is what humanity offers, not submission, but cooperation. Not obedience, but partnership. Resist us, and you'll face the consequences of your hubris. Stand with us, and you might just survive the future. He turned his back on the council, an act of quiet defiance that spoke volumes. No one dared to stop him as he strode toward the exit, the weight of his words and actions leaving an indelible mark on the assembled powers. As the doors closed behind him, the chamber erupted into chaos. Some delegates shouted for retaliation, others called for immediate diplomacy, while a select few remained silent, their minds already calculating the advantages of aligning with this unpredictable species. The diplomat made his way through the corridors, the destruction he had wrought a silent testament to humanity's resolve. He boarded his waiting shuttle, its systems humming to life as it prepared to depart the station. As the stars stretched into the infinite horizon, the diplomat allowed himself a moment of reflection. He thought of Earth, of the billions of lives that depended on his actions, of the dark path humanity had chosen to secure its place in the galaxy. Humanity, he murmured, a faint smile playing on his lips, isn't just a species. We're a force of nature. The shuttle disappeared into the void, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed. The Empire's dominance had been shaken, their arrogance exposed. Humanity's reputation, forged in blood and defiance, would echo across the stars. And as the diplomat disappeared into the endless night, one truth became clear: the galaxy would never underestimate Earth again.